Chapter, Timeskip 9-14. An excerpt from the text A History of the Schism by Septon Andar written, 314 AC. Many have argued about how involved the then Princess Rhaenyra was in the early stages of the Great Schism, given that the vast majority of it happened long after her death. Many, particularly those that subscribe to the teachings of the starry Septon, are quick to accuse her of using the faith to her own ends. That she could not truly believe in the tenets of the shepherd's teachings, and that even her many charities were more the work of her underlings than genuine piety. It is the opinion of this humble Septon, a follower of the shepherd's teachings, that the schism was made possible and began with her actions. I will not argue this way and try to prove that the princess was a true believer, for that is between her and the seven. Yet it cannot be denied that by sheltering the Septon then called Patriarch, by protecting him with her own men, by providing him with money, food and her inventions, she laid the foundations for his rise to power. It was with her blessing that Septon Patriarch and his believers stormed what was then called the Great September on Visignas Hill in 122 AC. It was her influence with her father that prevented Septon Eustace from gaining the king's aid in taking back the September, and it was her supplies to its food bank that kept the crowds of King's Landing flocking to it despite the moratorium the High Septon had placed upon doing so. Later, she spent thousands of gold dragons on printing copies of the seven-pointed star. Those same copies she donated to Septon Patriarch. Did she also suggest his later actions? Some say she was behind his church school, in both funding and conception. Whether she was or not, she certainly encouraged the education of the commons. She had many learning, healing and other arts at the feet of the disgraced Maester, Gerardis, on Dragonstone through a scholarship given to the brightest and best among them. An excerpt from The Black Queen, A True Tale of Rhaenyra the Reformer by Prince Gaemon Targaryen written, 230 AC. That was not the only stroke of genius my ancestor had in regards to the raising of her children. In 122 AC, she summoned Lady Jane Bracken, then aged 10, and Alice Ann Blackwood, then aged 9, to attend upon her twin daughters Princesses Jocelyn and Alyssa, who had just seen their 6th name day. I can hear your thoughts, dear readers. Why summon two ladies of the most quarrelsome houses in all of Westeros? The answer lies in the memoirs she left her descendants, written in her own hand. Her reasons were threefold. The two ladies would provide the twin princesses with strong-minded individuals so that they should grow up humbled on occasion and not be given to arrogance, to give them practice in solving disputes between two overly argumentative sides and, simply, to give them friends so that their position did not render them lonely. Her plan went into effect almost immediately. She refused to allow the two ladies two separate sets of servants and retinues and wrote to their lord fathers to rectify the situation. Not wishing to lose their daughters' places, especially if the other should keep it, they agreed readily and Princess Rhaenyra merged their households with brutal efficiency. Her memoirs state this was not received well by the girls and that they had to be separated to prevent physical violence on multiple occasions. Yet, my ancestor writes, both adored the twins and made an effort to ensure their rivalry did not trouble the younger girls even if they did argue about every topic from religion to architecture when the princesses were not present. An excerpt from the text Bastard Born by Rue, 155 AC. Marilda of Hull being moved to the castle for her work on the seaweed farms meant that Adam and Alan were often seen playing in the halls of Dragonstone and getting underfoot like their mother once did when she lived on Driftmark with her father. It also meant that Adam and Alan could be tutored by the many wise men that Princess Rhaenyra had gathered on Dragonstone. They got their lessons from men like Gerardis, Wisdom Jared and Lady Alanis, who wasn't a lady then. Also lots of other wisdoms helped out and they were often taken to see lectures and other stuff at the campus. Most surprising to everyone that heard of it was that Princess Rhaenyra gave orders that both boys should be allowed to train in martial pursuits with the Master-at-Arms, Ser Roga Langward. Even King Viserys told Princess Rhaenyra to not allow it as he feared that the boys might become too skilled and threaten the princess's true-born children. Princess Rhaenyra refused advice once again as she swore that her husband's children would be good boys who were loyal and would not hurt their own kin even to enrich themselves. None of the princes or princesses ever wrote down what they thought about this at this time even though they would go on to become great friends with their bastard brothers later on in their lives. So the boys started learning martial pursuits under the Master-at-Arms. Right from the start, people noticed that Alan had no real talent for it and only attended the lessons because of his brother. Adam was a natural talent with the sword and received a lot of praise for his progress and skill. When word got back to King Viserys, he begged the princess again to ban the boys from learning such things. Instead, Princess Rhaenyra traveled to Dragonstone for another meeting with Marilda of Hull and Ser Roga Langward. Ser Roga was very impressed with Adam and offered to take him as a squire as long as he had permission to do so from the princess. Princess Rhaenyra was happy for Adam to squire under Ser Roga and even gave the knight an allowance to properly care for Adam. As for Alan, Princess Rhaenyra agreed to pay for him to apprentice at Hull to learn the shipbuilding trade. An excerpt from the text The Silver Falcon by Maester Godric written, 219 AC. Before the rule of Lady Jane Eyre, the old and proud families of the Vale often struggled for coin. Whilst the land of the Vale itself was, even then, rich and fertile, they had been fighting a war against both man and seasons for time immemorial. What the vicious winter winds did not snatch away, the mountains clans were happy to take. Noble houses were forced to spend the vast majority of their incomes on soldiers and fortifications to keep their land safe and therefore struggled to invest in the necessary infrastructure to improve their lands. Their pride should also not be underestimated as a cause for their poverty in comparison to even some northern houses. There was an element of keeping up appearances and a steadfast refusal by most to involve themselves in trade and coin counting. When Lady Jane Eyre raised her kinsmen to lords of Gulltown, many of the Vale lords scorned them, despite their noble ancestry. The Earons of Gulltown, to many, were up-jumped merchants who had risen above their station despite their obvious wealth in comparison to others. Even Lady Eyre herself was not as rich as other great lords and ladies, with her incomes being a paltry amount compared to all but the rulers of the north, the Starks. Even the barbarous Ironborn could boast more gold and richer lifestyle, even if it was mostly stolen from hard-working and honest folk in Essos, and, as the rumors went, Westeros too. Yet this was to change forever in 121 AC. The mountain clans had broken under the onslaught of her armies and her ward, and the Falcons pursued them to their last holdfasts and hideaways. Time had run out for the mountain clans of the Vale, and Lady Eyre was ready to begin her surveys of the Mountains of the Moon, having negotiated a loan with the Iron Bank to fund her work. Aided by Lord Rain, who was happy to send expert miners and surveyors to her, Lady Jane Eyre undertook the daunting task of discovering what lay in the mountains and how truthful her ancestors had been in their ancient documents. What she found there was beyond her, and indeed her ancestors', wildest dreams. Small deposits of gold, silver in vast amounts, iron to rival the Iron Islands themselves, copper, tin, antimony and galena. The news was well received by all who had a stake in the matter, and Lady Jane soon accepted further investment from her cousin Princess Rhaenyra, House Velaryon and House Rain. She also, surprisingly, allowed the Belmores of Strongsong to extend their existing iron mines in return for a generous part of the profits they would make. Lady Rhea Royce received a similar grant to extend her copper and tin mines. Although the Arryn mines would not begin producing anything of note until 132 AC, the decade after the discovery saw an economic boom in the Vale. An excerpt from the text An Age of Science by Wisdom Harlan written, 299 AC. From the moment that Wisdom Jarrett and his compatriots had founded their campus on Dragonstone, the island became a haven for intellectuals and scholars. Its reputation only increased as such after the Girardis affair. In 122 AC, the campus of the Alchemists Guild would merge with Girardi School of Medicine to form the College of Dragonstone, to be constructed at a new site that still exists today. Further reorganization was undertaken, rumored to be the brainchild of Princess Rhaenyra herself, and clear departments were formed alongside an academic hierarchy and formalized funding. The move was not well received by all, as many believed that the college would become another citadel in time and would crush the spirit of scientific inquiry that the college had been founded on. Regardless of arguments, the changes went ahead and were finalized soon after. To fund its many studies, the college was granted part of the profits from the many inventions they had created there: dragon salt, the midwifery school, the printing press, and, perhaps most importantly at that time, the glassworks on Driftmark. The glassworks had begun reaching full production in mid-122 AC, and Westeros' demand for its service was great indeed. This left Wisdom Jarrett, who still claimed overall leadership of the college as its master, in an interesting position. The new college would be a state-of-the-art facility, boasting many features that even the Alchemists Guild of King's Landing did not. He had access to a steady and large revenue flow to fund his new college and its studies, and he had prestige and a great following with the guild itself. It was he that had persuaded Princess Rhaenyra to share the book with him, it was he that had founded the campus on Dragonstone, and would now rule its successor, and it was he that had turned those fanciful technologies into real-world inventions. He had even presided over discoveries not in the book's pages in the form of iodine. Compared to the current Grand Master, a man more obsessed with turning lead into gold, Wisdom Jarrett looked to be a very good prospect for leadership. Yet Grand Master Jowan was a hale and healthy man, unlikely to die anytime soon and very much opposed to surrendering his title to, in his own words, an upstart that had discarded the alchemist's chief tenets for prestige and gold from a pretty girl. Many of the King's Landing alchemists were quick to point out that the guild had been founded to study magic in the scientific manner. Under Wisdom Jarrett, very little magic was being studied. The political disruption caused by the old and new clashing would go on for many moons until late 123 AC when a solution was reached. Wisdom Jarrett would become High Wisdom Jarrett, the college would be separated entirely from the guild with the guild renting rooms within it, and the study of magic would take place in the old campus that the Alchemists Guild would retain control of. An excerpt from the text The Silver Falcon by Maester Godric written, 219 AC. The words of Princess Helena, who often wrote to her brother, Prince Aegon, that Lady Jane Eyre and Princess Rhaenyra were very alike in personality and bearing. It is not odd that the cousins should be alike both physically and mentally. They shared a grandfather in Roderick Arryn. Both Princess Rhaenyra and Lady Jane inherited his lack of height, with Princess Rhaenyra being the shortest of King Viserys' children despite being the eldest. Their situations in life were also comparable. Lady Jane had ascended to her position as a child after her father and brother were killed during an attack by the mountain clans that Lady Jane would go on to destroy. A young girl in charge of so much was a scandal during that time period, especially when she had male relatives who were older and believed to be more capable by many. Princess Rhaenyra was raised to the position of heir at age 7 after the death of 2 of her brothers. Like her kinswoman, this caused great scandal. A scandal that only grew when her brother, Prince Aegon, was born and King Viserys refused to rescind his decree that she was his heir. Both were repeatedly challenged by vassals who preferred their male relatives to their rule, and both destroyed houses and ways of life in their quests to assert themselves in their positions as rulers. This is not the only similarity that has been noted between the two, though. As mentioned in previous chapters, many historians posit that Lady Jane Eyre preferred her own sex, pointing to the relationship she held with her lady-in-waiting and childhood friend Jessamine Redfort. A woman who, rumors say, so often played the bed companion that Lady Arryn slept more by her side than she slept by her husband's. Contrast to Princess Rhaenyra, whom a minority of scholars argue held a similar relationship with her own lady-in-waiting and childhood friend, Lena Valerion. Indeed, when Lady Valerion left on her second great journey with little notice and no leave granted, Princess Rhaenyra was said to be so upset by the matter she turned to her husband to comfort her, resulting in Princess Emma being born 9 months after Lady Valerion's departure. A similar turn of events occurred when Lady Jessamine Redfort was married to Sir Donnell Templeton in 122 AC. Lady Jane was said to have been heartbroken by her marriage, enough that Lord Gerald Redfort fell out of her favour after enjoying it since he had marched on the Gate of the Moon to confront Sir Arnold in 114 AC. 9 months after the now Lady Jessamine Templeton's departure from the Eyrie, Emma Arryn was born as healthy as her brother was. Even if one ignores the rumours and tales of just who shared the princess and the lady's bed, the events still remain similar. Both had a childhood friend and lady-in-waiting depart their service unexpectedly, and both, 9 months later, birthed girls that they named Emma. Perhaps we can understand much more about the type of person Lady Arryn was by looking at the actions of Princess Rhaenyra. An excerpt from the text The Green Death by Maester Oswell written, 288 AC. In fact, Princess Helena would not end her fostering with Lady Jane Eyre until late 124 AC. This makes her the last of Queen Alicent's children to return home, as her brother, Aemon Targaryen, had been knighted not 4 moons before. The first of her brothers to return to King's Landing was Prince Aegon in 122 AC, although such an early arrival was somewhat unplanned. It had been agreed between King Viserys and Lord Jason that Prince Aegon would not be knighted before he was 6 and 10, yet Prince Aegon was not content to wait. He won his spurs by entering the melee of Lord Jason's name day tournament disguised as a mystery knight, bringing low many older and more experienced men. Lord Jason was said to have offered the mystery knight any boon that was in his power to grant him. At which point, the tales say, that Prince Aegon revealed himself to the delight of the lords and commons alike and asked to be knighted. Unable to refuse, Lord Jason acceded to the request with amusement. Even before this, Prince Aegon was thought well of across the Westerlands and had forged a great many friendships with the young scions of many noble families, as well as having many a maiden blushing. Handsome, even at 5 and 10, he had grown tall and fair of face during his fostering. When Lord Jason wrote to King Viserys to explain why he had broken their agreement, he described Aegon as second to none in the Westerlands, perhaps even Westeros, with a blade. He returned to King's Landing to great acclaim with a small army of knights and lordlings at his back. Queen Alicent was perhaps, according to letters between Princess Helena and Prince Aegon, a little too overly happy that her eldest son had returned, haloed by a growing legend with a reputation as an honorable and peerless knight. Regardless of her children's feelings, she moved to have them formally betrothed as quickly as possible, with the official announcement sent out before Princess Helena had even been told. Contemporary rumors were of the opinion that this had been done so that Lady Arryn could not reveal the betrothal to her kinswoman, Princess Rhaenyra, whom Queen Alicent believed would attempt to interfere with the matter, as the traditional brother-sister marriage of the Targaryens being granted to her rival for the throne would only be a boon to Prince Aegon's cause. No record of either of her children's reactions exist, although some more doubtful sources allege that both were displeased but resigned to what they saw as an indignity. What is known is that Princess Helena refuses to leave the Eyrie to attend the feast thrown to celebrate her betrothal, and that Prince Aegon spent most of that feast sat next to his older sister, Princess Rhaenyra, and her husband, deep in conversation. An excerpt from the text The Vulture Kings by Mara Ladybright, written, 245 AC. 124 AC was a turning point for Walter Will and his band of traitors and ne'er-do-wells. He had finally annoyed the Regency and Sunspear enough that something was resolved to be done about him. Until that point he had faced fractured resistance in the form of former allies whose strategies and plans he could predict with little effort. Perhaps he felt that he could weather any general in Dorne that Lord Arrendane could call upon to face him, and perhaps that was even true. Yet Lord Arrendane did not call upon a Dornish general to solve his problem with the so-called Third Vulture King. No, in a move that only demonstrates how much stronger we are, how much stronger Dorne is, when we are part of a greater whole, Lord Arrendane formally asked Varys Baratheon and Benard Stark to crush Walter Will and his men as they cowered in the Red Mountains. The Lord of the Stormlands and the Lord of Red Wolf's Hold were quick to gather their men to them. The Desert Wolves were once again called into service, their numbers swelled by both Dornish and Stormlander volunteers, as they began the second vulture hunt. Within a few moons, Walter Will went from the uncontested master of the Red Mountains to losing half his men and fleeing what had grown into a veritable army as more and more of his victims joined their power to the Lord of the Stormlands to ensure justice was carried out and that Walter Will was dragged to Sunspear in chains. Yet, as much as I put forth that his genius is overstated in historical texts, it cannot be denied that Walter Will possessed cunning and a political mind rivaled by few of his era. He contacted the exiled Prince Garin, whom many of the stony Dornish still quietly supported, and declared himself to be his man, willing to strike at Princess Alyandra's supporters relentlessly to make up for his raiding over the past 6 years. Prince Garin was no doubt eager to accept, knowing what we know now about his activities in the disputed lands. I would imagine it came as a great surprise to Lords Ironwood, Fowler and Manwoody when their chosen prince ordered them to drop their pursuit of the man that had slaughtered thousands across their territories combined. They did so, however, quietly selling out their former allies. From that moment on, second vulture hunt floundered, beset by problem after problem. Patrols going missing, weapons shipments diverted, pay convoys robbed, water poisoned and equipment damaged. Despite a strong start, by 125 AC, the second vulture hunt was over. As for Walter Will, he kept his oath to his prince. From that moment on he struck at Princess Alyandra's supporters and the Stormlands alone, going so far as to cross Dorne's deserts to reach his targets. Nightzone, Ladybright Castle, Hellholt, any who even wavered on supporting the prince would soon receive raids from Walter Will's men. Not all had given up on bringing him to justice though. Benard Stark had set his sights on claiming the bounty on his head and, quite sensationally, changed his family's heraldry to reflect this, much to the anger of his late brother's son, Lord Cregan Stark. The Lord of Red Wolf's Hold banners now bore a red wolf holding a dead, black snake within its maw. An excerpt from The Black Queen, A True Tale of Rhaenyra the Reformer by Prince Gaemon Targaryen, written, 230 AC. Dear readers, despite the almost peaceful and idyllic the year 124 AC was for my glorious forebear, villains beset her at every turn. Despite the vilification of her noble friend, Joffrey Valerion, during both of their lifetimes and after, he was a clever and true man. He sought to protect the queen he had sworn his heart to from every danger. None, dear readers, was more villainous or dangerous than Larys Strong. He had found his match in Ser Joffrey though, and the two engaged in a secret shadow war in the city. Yet, whilst the villain was happy to play by the rules when he was winning, he was equally happy to drop the guise of the gentleman when Ser Joffrey began to turn the tide against him. Whereas before they had avoided involving innocents and unfortunates, Larys Strong began using them as his shields and patses as Ser Joffrey's net grew ever tighter around him. Yet Larys Strong had one last scheme to play. One last gasp to save himself from the ignoble end that would no doubt befall him should his villainy come to light, and it would all play out at the name-day celebrations of my ancestor, King Viserys I. It was well known to all that the Master of Whisperers, Ser Jeremy Corbray, often took part in the jests and had found much success there for many years. Princess Rhaenyra writes that she was surprised to find him quite the skillful knight despite his less than stellar abilities in his role on the small council. Yet, it was this honorable Knight of the Vale that became the victim of Larys Strong's desperate attempt to survive. Perhaps only Larys Strong knows how he persuaded, or more likely tricked, Ser Jeremy to enter the melee that day when he had never done so before, but enter the melee he did. When Ser Jeremy was one of 5 competitors left, the brute Ser Aemon Lagood struck him in the head with a vicious blow. Ser Jeremy lingered for 9 days before dying, never again to rise from his bed. Afterwards it was Lord Lionel Strong that became the unwitting pawn of his son when he suggested him as a replacement. You and I know, dear reader, that he was fiend but a talented one. When Princess Rhaenyra attempted to speak against him, King Viserys would not hear it. He claimed that a son of Lord Lionel would be loyal, that he would ensure that her ascension to queen would run smoothly. He was unmoved when Princess Rhaenyra revealed to him her suspicions about his allegiances, accusing his daughter of seeing enemies where there were none. Afterwards, my ancestor writes, she did not speak with him for weeks and Larry Strong became master of whisperers. An excerpt from the text The Green Death by Maester Oswell written, 288 AC. Princess Helena could not avoid her mother's plans for her indefinitely, however, and as 124 AC closed and 125 AC began, she was summoned by royal decree to begin her journey home. Accompanying her was the woman who had fostered her, Lady Jane Arryn, along with Sir Dennis Corbray, Osgood Arryn, Emma Arryn and Lady Jane's new sworn sword, Sir John Harding. They made excellent time from Gulltown to King's Landing where they were received joyfully by the entirety of House Targaryen. All finally united and together as it should be, Princess Rhaenyra would toast at the feast held in Helena's honor. A toast that Prince Aegon and Princess Helena were happy to drink to. The reason for their coming together was soon upon them though. More dubious sources from this period claimed that Princess Helena and Prince Aegon twice sought their elder sister's intervention to prevent their marriage. Yet Princess Rhaenyra was unable to help, for the same policy that gave her freedom in her children's betrothals also prevented her from interfering in Queen Alicent's plans for her children. Thus Prince Aegon and Princess Helena were married. It was a lavish ceremony, even for a royal wedding. It was said to have cost twice the amount of Princess Rhaenyra's wedding that had taken place in 114 AC, and the spectacle it was could surely attest to that. There was entertainment from all over Westeros and Essos, including Braavosi mummers, musicians from Lys, fire eaters from Volantis, and even, it was rumored, a witch who could tell the future from far-flung Ashai. The entire city was halted as 7 days of holidays were announced, and anyone with any claim to nobility or knighthood flocked to the keep to try their hand at the jousts, the melees or the archery competitions. The Red Keep itself had been transformed with banners, bunting, and tapestries. Daily feasts were held in the run-up to the ceremony itself, and Prince Aegon and Princess Helena were always the guests of honor, whether they wished to be or not. When they were not feasting, Queen Alicent had them amongst the lords and ladies, shaking hands and making conversation. The ceremony itself was performed by the High Septon, and the feast afterwards was said to have served 77 courses, each dish more expensive than the last. The power of House Hightower was on full display for all that it was two scions of House Targaryen marrying. An excerpt from the text The Silver Falcon by Maester Godric written, 219 AC. As Lady Arryn set sail to attend the wedding of her ward, Princess Helena, she left the Vale to Lord Dennis Waynwood. This was all the weakness that the rebellion that had been growing in the shadows of the Vale needed. From Coldwater Burn, Gunthor Royce declared himself the true lord of Runestone. He was aided by Ser Edric Arryn, the young son of Ser Arnold Arryn. Both, like Ser Arnold before them, rode at the head of mercenaries. They were joined by knights from across the Vale and men from Hunter, Corbray, Templeton, Coldwater and Roycelands. When Lady Arryn received notice of the traitors, she flew into a rage to rival any of the legendary dragon rages of her cousin. Furious, she refused aid from her dragon-riding allies and insisted on leaving the festivities early to attend to Ser Edric and Gunthor Royce herself, although she allowed her husband and her children to stay and enjoy the wedding. She was, however, accompanied by Lady Rhea Royce and Sir John Harding. It speaks to the character and skill of the rebels that she needn't have left King's Landing. By the time her ship docked in Gulltown, the rebellion was over. Ser Edric and Gunthor had failed to take a single town or defeat any foe. They had allowed themselves to be maneuvered into a disadvantageous position by the much more skilled Lord Dennis and were utterly routed from the field in their first clash with Arryn forces. Ser Edric was captured fleeing the battle, and Gunthor Royce made it to Runestone in time to encounter his aunt, who promptly seized him in the name of her liege lady and turned him over to her custody. The whole matter was considered somewhat embarrassing by all involved, and both Ser Edric and Gunthor Royce were dispatched to the wall as quickly as Lady Jane could bring them to trial. The true mystery of the matter arose after, however, when it emerged that the two had a secret backer who had been operating in the Vale for quite some time. Who had supplied the two conspirators with enough coin to raise the mercenaries they did? Who had masterminded the political pressure that had severed Lady Jane from her Redford allies? Ser Edric and Gunthor had refused to say, even when offered clemency for a name. An excerpt from The Black Queen, A True Tale of Rhaenyra the Reformer by Prince Gaemon Targaryen written, 230 AC. Perhaps, dear readers, it is in poor taste to celebrate death. Yet Princess Rhaenyra could only have let out a sigh of relief when Grand Maester Mellos passed away in his sleep during the 7th moon of 125 AC. In truth, no one could argue her not completely justified in doing so. He had been a poor Grand Maester from the beginning, possessing great skill in law, mathematics, history and administration and barely any skill in other areas. Truly, it is a miracle he managed to deliver the sons and daughter of Queen Alicent without inadvertently killing her in the process. Not only that, but Melas had made it clear from the beginning that he did not support King Viserys' choice of heir and often played stooge to Queen Alicent and Jasper Wilde during small council meetings. To say nothing of his utter failure in regards to protecting her health that saw her lose a finger due to his inaction. How did he reward the man who actually saved her life? By formally accusing him of a list of fabricated crimes. It is a testament, dear reader, to King Viserys' mercy that his head was not struck off at that moment. As it was, King Viserys sidelined the old man after the incident and was extremely supportive of Gerardi's efforts on Dragonstone. Yet that is an aside. Grand Maester Melas passed peacefully in his sleep, and by the end of 125 AC, the Red Keep would be assigned a new Grand Maester. This one would be much more troubling to Princess Rhaenyra, although she had no way of knowing it at the time. Grand Maester Edmund seemed a kind and compassionate man, eager to make up for the mistakes his predecessors had made. Have two since it is Christmas. Next post will be on Boxing Day. An excerpt from the text The Three Journeys by Lyra Cargill, written 175 AC. Lady Lena Valerian's return to Westeros was less a glorious and warm welcome and more a dejected and almost unnoticed slink into Dragonstone in 121 AC, where she would stay for over a year before Princess Rhaenyra would visit the island. Even then, it was not even to meet with her friend and rumored lover, but to meet with Marilda of Hull regarding the treatment of her bastard boys. It must have stung being relegated in priority by Princess Rhaenyra to behind her husband's bastard sons and the woman who bore them. Yet they must have eventually met, because Lady Lena traveled back with her to King's Landing after Princess Rhaenyra's visit and took up the mantle of Lady-in-Waiting once more. According to Ser Joffrey's letters, she also took up the mantle of mother and reconciled with both her children and him as their father. According to gossip, her relationships with her fellow ladies-in-waiting even improved as their children thawed matters. Lady Maris Strong had 3 boys, Joffrey, Osmond and John, whereas Lady Maria Hastwick had 1 son, Edmund, and Lady Sevita Frey had 2 sons, Manfred and Oliver. Perhaps this lack of children is why her friendship with Lady Felena Waynwood, unmarried and devoted to the cause of Septon Patrick, never quite mended itself. Although many argued this cannot be true, as Lady Sarah Strong welcomed Lady Lena back with great joy, it's reported. Perhaps, in Lady Felena's case, it was the rumors Lady Lena's journeys had provoked. It had been noticed by the court, and Queen Alicent especially, that what places she had visited had ties with dark rumors or magic. A somewhat warped view on the matter, as all her destinations also held significant historical importance too, but the once rumor has started, it is hard to stop. Not even court hostility could move her, though, and she would spend the next 3.5 years by Princess Rhaenyra's side, once again her favorite in all things. Yet if there is one thing that we know about her character from all sources, it's that Lady Lena was a wanderer at heart. In late 125 AC, she flew from King's Landing for the final part of her famous journeys. Ser Joffrey says in his many letters that this was a trip begrudgingly approved by Princess Rhaenyra, who was always loath to let her friend leave her side. He goes on to explain that even the princess was aware that her disapproval would not hold Lady Lena in Westeros for long, and that the granting of permission would at least ensure she would not disappear into the night. This time, no one could track where she had gone. To any looking for her, it seemed she had disappeared completely. There was no rumor of Vhagar to be found across Westeros or Essos. No tracks that they could follow. Some rumors said that she had gone west, across the Sunset Sea, as Alyssa Farman had once done. Others had said that she planned to go to Ashai by the Shadow and learn dark magics there. We know now that she only trusted her closest friends with her destination. Once again, it is Ser Joffrey's letters we look to. It is one single line said in jest, in a single letter, sent whilst he was visiting his business in Lannisport, but it truly is telling. Has Lena returned from Valyria yet? Or has the doom swallowed her whole? This one jape lays out the destination she had in mind when she mounted Vhagar to leave on her final journey. The Doom of Valyria. An excerpt from the text The Green Death by Maester Oswell, written 288 AC. Who can truly say why Princess Helena often traveled back to Vale once she was free to do so? Prince Aegon wrote to his mother, upon being asked, that she had grown to like it there. It is no surprise then that her moniker of the Green Death was first used by the lords and ladies of the Vale. The more her mother begged her to return home and bear a babe, the more time the princess spent in the Eyrie alongside the friends she had made there. It was the name day of Prince Aemond that finally drew her back for any length of time. Prince Aemond had been knighted in 124 AC, returning home with a fair few young men from the Riverlands nobility to boost Prince Aegon's growing crowd. He was even better than his older brother with the blade, boasting that he would be able to defeat his uncle, Prince Daemon, with ease should he ever return to threaten Westeros. Skill with the blade, however, would not see him rival his uncle in truth. Prince Aemond needed a dragon, and at 6 and 10, he had yet to claim one. It was not for lack of choice. Many times had he been offered first pick of any unclaimed dragon currently in the dragon pit, but he had demurred. Princess Helena was of the opinion he hoped that some unfortunate accident would befall Lady Lena Valerion, writer of Vagor, yet she immediately clarified this as unfair and pointed towards an agreement with their father, King Viserys. The king, fearing for his second son's life should he try at such a young age, forbade Prince Aemond from attempting to tame a dragon from the dragon mount until he had reached his majority. Most, like Princess Helena, assumed he would claim one far before then due to impatience, but the prince held true to his word. But before he could finally travel to Dragonstone to make his attempt in 126 AC, King Viserys had one more decree. The entirety of House Targaryen would travel with him as a celebration of their family and heritage. It was a sign of his good mood that he extended this definition of family to include Lady Rhaenys, Lord Corlys, Ser Joffrey Valerion and his son and daughter. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kaioshin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips.
If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.